The Labour Party, they kicked off their conference in Brighton on Saturday and it's already seen its fair share of problems, leadership difficulties, name-calling and confusion. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves is making a speech there later and Rachel joins us now. Rachel, how are you?
I'm very good, Alistair. How are you?
I'm fine. Now, listen, you will remember as well as I do Tony Blair's last speech as conference leader. He said to the Labour Party, if we can't beat this lot, meaning the Tories, we don't deserve to be in the game. And we've not won since. And we look at the mess that this government appears to be creating on so many levels, and yet Labour still struggling to get cut through to the public. So you've got this week. What is the purpose of this week? How are you going to start to break through to the public in a way that thus far you haven't done?
Look, we've got a massive job to do after the last election in particular, which was one of our worst defeats on record. We've got to win back the trust of ordinary working people right across the country. And this week is about setting out our vision for the future. Today, I will be announcing at conference that Labour would scrap business rates entirely to help our struggling high streets. Many businesses on the high street, as you both know, have had an incredibly difficult year and a half. 4 out of 5 high street businesses say that if the government go ahead with their increase in business rates next year, they'll have to consider closing outlets. In the first 6 months of this year, every single day, 50 high street businesses, high street shops were closing. And so something has got to be done to stem that tide and to ensure that every part of the country has got a thriving high street again. And that's why we are making this announcement and saying that some of those businesses who have done well this last year and a half because of the changing way that people are shopping and living their lives should pay a bit more in tax to level the playing field. That is right. It will help our economy and our high streets thrive, will help small businesses who are the lifeblood of our economy. And it's
Rachel, you're
unapologetically pro-worker and unapologetically pro-business too.
You're talking there, I presume, about the big internet giants, OK? That they're the ones who are not paying their way. But how are you going to get them to pay tax? You can't do that as the British government alone.
Well, there's 2 things. First of all, there's already a digital services tax. We're saying that if we were in government today, we would have a one-off increase in that to raise the money, to freeze business rates next year and increase the threshold for small business rates relief. But we know that we need to go further than that, and the change that is needed is more fundamental than that. President Joe Biden has put forward proposals to have a global minimum rate of corporation tax to ensure that some of those businesses who not only are not paying much in business rates but also are registered overseas for corporation tax actually pay tax in the countries in which they do business and sell their goods and services. That is due to come in, we hope, as early as next year. We could use that money, some of that money, it should raise just in the United Kingdom alone, several £billion, use that money to level the playing field when it comes to taxation. And that's the right thing to do, to get that balance right, to help our high streets and help small businesses who've had a torrid time this last 18 months.
Do you think that ordinary working people think it's OK to describe your opposition as scum?
Look, I think there are a lot of people who are queuing for petrol this morning, who are worried about the universal credit cuts next month, who are worried about the rising gas and electricity bills, who are also using pretty strong language at the moment to describe this government.
Oh, so
I don't tend to use that sort of language.
You think that that's OK? The use of the word scum to describe people that you don't agree with is OK because people are het up at the moment at a time of crisis? So it's legitimate.
Susanna, what I'm saying is that a lot of people are using strong language at the moment. I don't tend to use those sorts of words and that sort of language, but I can understand why people, not just at this conference in Brighton, but around the country, are angry at the moment. And the role of the Labour Party is to set out a vision and a plan for the future that give people the confidence that they can trust Labour with their money and their national security and vote for us again.
The role of senior politicians, and of course we're referring to the use of the word scum by Angela Rayner, deputy leader, at a meeting of Labour activists. Part of the role of senior politicians is to be role models, isn't it? And I just wonder whether the use of that word debases political discourse and conduct. I mean, particularly, you know, we heard from Andrew Pearce a little bit earlier on the programme saying he's been called dreadful language there at the Labour Party conference. We have one of your MPs, Rosie Duffield, says she doesn't feel safe at Labour Party conference. I mean, it doesn't say very much, does it, about the conduct of political life?
Well, look, Boris Johnson himself has used some pretty choice language in the past, and that is also language that I wouldn't use, whether it is to describe people of different minority groups, whether it's to describe women. I wouldn't use that language either.
No, but you don't have any control over Boris Johnson. Sir Keir Starmer, you would imagine, would have some control over the language or behaviour of those in the party. Yeah. He said he would go and talk to Angela Rayner. Angela Rayner says she's not going to apologise. Do you think she should?
I think Angela's got to account for herself for the language that she uses. It's not language that I would use. But I want to focus today in this conference on Labour's plan and vision for the country, because I think what most people want to know is, would a Labour government make a difference to my life? And the plans that I'm setting out today on taxation, on supporting our high streets, in ensuring that the jobs of the future come to this country, I hope that that will excite and motivate people, but also help to win back the trust that Labour needs to win the next election.
Well, one of the problems you have is that Sir Keir Starmer just doesn't seem to be popular enough at the moment outside of Labour. I'm not even sure how popular he is inside of Labour. You've already said that Angela Rayner is reflective, and her language is reflective of ordinary working people, particularly those people who are aggravated by the crisis that we're in. We saw that she did a very open interview at the weekend and a photo shoot for the Times magazine. Do you think she'd make a better leader?
I think that Keir is doing a great job of leader of the Labour Party. He managed yesterday at conference, against the odds, to change the rules of our party, to make us look outwards to the electorate, to help us win again. Whether it is on big calls like the circuit break last autumn, or forensically taking Boris Johnson apart at Prime Minister's questions, Keir Starmer has got what it takes to be the Prime Minister of this country. He's a man of deep integrity and honesty. He's somebody who absolutely is qualified to do the job. And I hope in his conference speech on Wednesday, it's not just us in this conference hall that see that, but people across the country, because I think the country is crying out for change. But what they want to know is whether they can trust Labour again, and whether they could see Keir Starmer as our Prime Minister and myself as the Chancellor. We hope at the end of this week, when they ask that question, the answer will be yes.
Rachel, I can feel your frustration that you're having to answer questions about things that I'm sure were not planned for this conference. I don't think you expected to be answering questions on the day of your speech about how Angela Rayner described Boris Johnson or anybody else. But there's something else I want to ask you about, which I think is a real problem for the Labour Party. Do you regret now the Labour Party voting for Boris Johnson's Brexit deal, given that we're seeing the consequences of that deal now play out in some pretty catastrophic ways?
When that deal was put to us at the end of last year, it was a take-it-or-leave-it basis. We either voted for the deal and had trading arrangements with our nearest neighbours, or we voted against the deal and there would have been no agreement and no cooperation. That would have been a disaster, and the problems that we see now would have been even greater if we had rejected any sort of deal at all. Labour have always been clear, a deal is better than no deal. But we said at the time that there were gaping holes in that deal. And since last year, I've been meeting and talking with the Road Haulage Association and hauliers about some of the problems coming down the line. The government ignored those problems, which is why we are now facing the situation where people go to the supermarkets and see shortages of goods on the shelves, and why they're queuing up at petrol stations and not being able to fill up their tank. That is not acceptable. This is an out-of-touch and complacent government.
But will you today, and will Keir on Wednesday, explain how the Labour Party intends to fix those holes in the Brexit deal? Because we have to have proper arrangements with the European Union, which at the moment we don't have, and you did vote for the deal that we're now living through.
Because we had no choice, Alistair. The choice was between a flawed deal and no deal whatsoever, and no deal would have been a disaster for our country. I'll be talking about Brexit in the conference speech today and how we would fix the Tories' Brexit mess. And I think that Keir will be talking about those issues as well, because so many of the problems we're facing now is because the government failed to plan for events that they bought in. They bought in this deal. They've had 5 years to plan for this, and what we're seeing now is utter chaos. And I think most people, they couldn't care less whether the HGV is being driven by a British worker or a foreign worker. What they want to know is when they get to the petrol station, they're going to be able to fill up their car. When they're trying to get presents for their kids at Christmas, they're going to be delivered. And when they're trying to order food, that it's available in our supermarkets and on our online deliveries. At the moment, because of this government's out of touch and complacent and negligent nature, those things are not guaranteed. They're pretty basic. It is the responsibility of government to ensure that these things are fixed. Labour have got a plan. Labour would fix these problems. The Tories are just adding to them.
Well, thanks for that. Have a nice conference. And if there's anybody from the government watching, we'd love a minister to come on and respond to any of that. Thank you.
Great to talk to you both.
Bye-bye.